Let me make sure we're all good to go. Let me know if you guys can hear me. As of right now, just make sure go ahead, type in the chat if you can hear me. It's been a while since I've done a stream, so I'm waiting for it to load on my end over here. It's not picked up exactly yet. But I should. Yep. Okay, there it goes. All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to a live stream. I know we haven't done a live stream in a very, very long time, but welcome back, guys. We are doing a live stream on the 2024 election. I mean, that's essentially what we're going to do it on, but we're also going to be looking at the races that are going on in Virginia, Georgia, and Oklahoma as well. That's also what we're going to be looking at here. So make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to go ahead and subscribe to the channel as well if you just popped in as of right now. Now, guys, I do have a new rule for the streams. I am going to have to do this. Guys, if you want me to answer a question, you're going to have to super chat. I don't care if it's 5 cents. I don't care if it's $1. I don't care how much it is. If you want me to answer a question, you're gonna have to send a super chat because at this point we've hit 15,000 subscribers. Sometimes I get distracted with chat and I'm trying to get to everybody's stuff and I really can't because now there's too many people and I'm trying to present the content to you guys as best as I can. So if you want me to absolutely see your question, make sure to go ahead and send a super chat in. And so, guys, I'm going to just be going over this. Biden right now is in a really bad spot. And what we're looking at here is right now, Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden by a pretty significant amount in the electoral college. He's leading him quite a bit. Now, if you notice, my election model has changed. It is a bit different from, my previous videos. I just actually revealed this model today, and it is slightly different. I don't have Biden's approval rating anymore. The only thing you change on here is the national average. That's literally the only thing that changes on here. That is literally the only thing that changes is the national aggregate. And as of right now, if we were to look at this, even if Biden was leading by the same amount he was before, Donald Trump still wins the election fairly easily, actually. He wins all the major swing states and wins easily. Right now, Donald Trump is leading in the aggregate by 2.4 percentage points. When we factor that in, the popular vote estimation based off of all these states right here is around plus 7.5 for the national popular vote. All of the aggregates I use include third-party candidates. So if I was using all the polling that did not include third-party candidates, we would definitely see a closer race. You'd probably see Trump win the popular vote by like around 3 or 4 in that case. But since there's third-party candidates involved, I do have that is the reason why you see a pretty large polling error. It's about 5.1, so that is a very large polling error there. And we see Trump is leading in crucial states by really large amounts. For example, in Ohio, he leads by 21. In Iowa, he's leading by 21 as well. Florida, he leads by 15.8. In Texas, he leads by 17.2. So that's roughly what we're kind of looking at there. And there are multiple reasons for this. And another thing for Biden is that the debate's next week. So that's already going to be a problem for the former president. Excuse me, for the incumbent president right now. He has a debate that he is expected to do very poorly in, and that could definitely affect the national average, which is definitely going to reflect on Joe Biden. And we actually see here that my model does include a demographic, trends as well. That is included. That is on the right side right here. We do have demographics that are included. Basically, what I do is I put all the margins in here of where I think everything is going to go in terms of where I think all the demographics will vote by, and I get an electoral college map and the results, and then I plug them in over here, and then it gets averaged out with the other things that are involved in the model, which is the polling and the projected result without demographics. Essentially what this is it tracks the nonpartisan voting pattern of every single state in 2012, 2016, and 2020. So essentially Alabama votes 26 points to the right of the nation. That was not the actual result in the election. If we actually look at the actual result in 2012, you're going to see that he ended up winning Alabama by 22 percentage points, but the state votes to the right of the nation by 26 percentage points, if that kind of makes sense. So it's basically, if every single state was tied in the popular vote, what would it look like? That's basically what we're kind of analyzing there. And essentially what happens is we look at the average shifts, everything is applied to all of the states here, and that's how we kind of get it. And also an elasticity score is calculated for every single state, so we basically look at the swing using the average swing here, and we determine the absolute value here to see, okay, how prone is the state to shifting. The state with the biggest elasticity score is in fact Utah. It has a elasticity score of 1, and so right now it's classified as a 37-point victory for Donald Trump as of right now. In the last election, it was only like a 20-point win, so that's also something to take into account as well. All of the polling is taken into account, which I do need to actually update the polling aggregates. But at the end of the day, we essentially have Donald Trump winning in a very big landslide in this election. And what we're going to actually see over here is, okay, so results are starting to come in for the Virginia primary already. Hung Cao is well ahead, less than 1% of the votes, but he's doing very well in Wise County. Oh, well, more. Oh, okay, well, 1%'s already in, and he's at 1,000 votes, and he's essentially winning in a landslide in the primary as of right now. Very curious to see what the primary turnout is going to be looking like here. We're going to go to Oklahoma just a second. I'm not sure if, okay, the polls do close in about an hour or so. And in Georgia, we already have some results right now coming in out of these counties. I will also be going over that as well. We will go to Virginia. We do see 1% of the votes in. Hung Cao is pretty much up here by quite a bit. We may see a little bit of regression for Hung Cao. Possibly these other candidates potentially do well in some of the, Loudoun and Fairfax areas. So that's something we're going to take a look for. So I wouldn't necessarily project this race yet, but I did expect Hung Cao to more than likely end up winning that primary race. If we go to the election map as of right now, we're going to be seeing that Donald Trump is up in the aggregate by 2.4%. Biden led the aggregate on this day 4 years ago by 8.8 and only won the popular vote by 4.5, and Clinton led it by 5.8 and only won the popular vote by 2.1. So that's something interesting to also note as well. And so when we fill out the electoral college map, we actually get something interesting. We see Donald Trump is winning in an electoral college landslide. In this scenario, we see Utah, Idaho, basically the Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming, all Nebraska except the second congressional district, which I'm going to get to that one in a second because that district's actually pretty interesting as of right now. We see that Biden ends up winning California, Maryland, DC, Massachusetts, and Vermont by safe margins. That gets him to 81 electoral votes. We see Iowa, a 21-point victory, same thing in Ohio. And just for you guys to know, the most accurate pollster and Solser, at least one of the most accurate pollsters in the nation, and actually pretty much got Iowa spot on in 2020, has Trump winning Iowa by 18. So that is an indication that this could theoretically possibly vote within the range of where I have it. I kind of have it a little bit in the higher range of that, but it is within the realm of possibility. Texas and Florida do go safe Republican. Florida above 15 points. Texas above 17. Maine second is also safe. We end up looking here. It's a 23-point victory. So that is a huge victory in Maine as of right now. And we see Alaska is also safe in this electoral college scenario. So we do in fact have Trump leading by quite a bit in the electoral college. If we look back for more results, see Edward Garcia is catching up quite significantly. I wonder what county he actually caught up in. I'm going to have to refresh the screen here. Let's see where he was able to catch up because that just got a way closer. I can't really hover over any of the counties. I don't know why, but I feel like there's a county by Roanoke that he was able to get in some votes in. However, I do expect him to be the favorite as of right now to be winning this. Oklahoma does not close their polls for a few more minutes. And we already have a lot of districts out of Georgia. A lot of the results are, especially this second district. I mean, he's pretty much, it's already 22% of the vote in. Wayne Johnson's essentially about to pick that off. So that's also interesting. And then Virginia, 2% of the votes in, and Hung Cao's at 53%. So he's leading by around 22 points or so. So that's a pretty big lead there. We can keep going, and we'll see that, something interesting about Wisconsin, there's a lot of factors. Donald Trump is currently forecast to win it by 10.5, so that's a pretty big victory, to be honest. In the average, I mean, he's only leading the average by a couple points, but he's projected right now to win it by about 10. As of right now, we see that Pennsylvania is around 10.1 percentage points, so that's about where I have it. And then Michigan, as of right now, is around an 8-point forecast for the former president, so that's where I kind of have the Rust Belt states. If we look at North Carolina, which I can pull it up. It's 11.5 point victory as of right now. We do have the state of Georgia as well, which is an 11 point win, which is actually a greater margin than all of the Rust Belt states. So Georgia is definitely going to vote Republican before most of these Rust Belt states. And then we also see Arizona is the second, is basically the second most prone to flip besides Michigan. And then Nevada, if we were to look at it, is around 10.5 percentage points. So that's roughly where all the major six swing states are sitting at right now. Again, we see Hung Cao has essentially gained his lead against Edward Garcia in the primary. It's 2% of the vote in, and he's leading by quite a substantial amount as of right now. We do see, a couple counties did report some results that make this a little closer, but that's fine. Hyper Rewind says virtually no chance Rust Belt goes to Trump by 8 to 10 points. Well, that's not necessarily impossible, because if we look at the demographic shifts that I have incorporated, and this is all based on polling data, by the way, this is kind of a subjective analysis of where I'm kind of putting the demographic margins at, but essentially this is where I kind of see them going as of right now, and I edited all of the demographic shifts. And if you look, Donald Trump is leading the aggregate by 2.4%. And so it's not entirely impossible for him to win this by more, especially since he's been underestimated both times. And the guy that he got underestimated, going against that guy now has 24 points less favorability than what he did back then on net. And so the chance of Trump being underestimated, or at least being the polls being accurate, I think is going to be very unlikely. If we have more data that shows that that's going to be the case, I would gladly, change my analysis. But the problem with your thesis is, if we go over here, I actually have a presentation document on this to kind of showcase what's actually going on here. And what's actually quite interesting about this forecast is that if we see right now, Biden has a net favorability of minus 15.5%. He was leading by 16.2 percentage points on election day in favorability. And if something that you're going to notice that is quite funny is that Donald Trump had around a 42% approval rating. Clinton, or excuse me, 37. Clinton ended up getting had a 42% favorability rating. Now, since neither one of them were the incumbent, you can't really use this. Okay, that's the exact margins they're going to get, but you kind of have an idea where the popular vote is going to go. I mean, essentially, if there was no third party candidates, Trump probably would have been able to basically lose that election, essentially, because Clinton would have probably won the popular vote by like 4 to 6 points. But since there was a large third party presence that ended up taking around 5% of the electorate, it kind of makes up for that margin. And so that's why you could kind of deduce, based off of the favorabilities, that that election was going to be close. And in 2020, what was also interesting is that Biden had around a 52% approval rating. He ended up getting 51.3%. And Trump, on the mean hand, was able, meanwhile, Trump had around a 45% approval rating on election day, and he was able to get 46.9. And so from that increase from 2020 or 2016, looking at their favorabilities, you would have been able to deduce that the election would have still been competitive. There was people saying, oh, Biden was going to win Florida, and oh, Ohio's going to be competitive. Just looking at their favorability ratings, you would have been able to deduce that the election would have still been competitive. But now, when you look at their favorability ratings, Donald Trump is basically 2 to 3 points ahead of Biden in favorability, which actually matches the polling data quite a bit. And actually, these numbers are pretty spot on with their favorability rating. Trump has around 42.5%. Biden's kind of around this number, maybe a little bit below that in terms of raw favorability. So this spread, it kind of matches how far they are each other in terms of favorability. And this is the first time Trump goes into an election cycle where he has a higher favorability than his opponent. And not only that, we're not that far from the election. And this is the first time Trump goes into a debate with a favorability rating higher than his opponent as well. And it's not even just that it's higher, it's that on net, it's like 10 points more favorable to Trump because Biden essentially led Trump in favorability by 6, 7 points. Now Trump leads by 2 or 3. So that's like an 8 or 9, 10 point net favorability swing in favor of Donald Trump. And what's quite interesting is they actually also polled the sample of, okay, if you voted in 2020 but not in a primary, who did you vote for last time? Or excuse me, it was in 2020 if you voted but did not vote in a primary, who are you going to vote for now? The same group who essentially were the nonpartisans in that demographic essentially are going to vote Trump plus one. So that's already a bad sign for Biden. And even people that voted in 2022, what's quite interesting about that is when you look at that demographic, they also pulled them and said, okay, who are you going to vote for now? And literally Biden leads the 2022 voters for the primaries by like 5. And then the people who actually voted in the election, but not the primaries, he basically ended up only winning those by 1. But the biggest thing to me that makes it more clear that he's going to win big is the fact that voters that essentially have not voted ever before, have no voting history, literally vote for Trump by plus 14 points. And this is from the New York Times / Siena College poll. So they are essentially one of the more reputable pollsters of the country. I am going to be adding in Connor K into the discussion as of right now. So that's actually exactly what I'm going to be setting up really quick. So I will be going ahead and putting all of my stuff together really quick. So do not. I'm going to put on my headphones because if not, it's going to have an echo back. So here we go. We're going to be adding him into the call. I thought he said he was here. Connor, go ahead and join the Discord. Okay, there you go. Hello.
I was just listening to your stream, so I had to mute that for a sec. How are you?
Doing good, man. I'm just here explaining to everybody why Trump is currently winning in an electoral college landslide as of right now. It was funny because if you would have asked me this even like 2, 3 months ago, I would have laughed in your face. But once kind of Gold Crown Politics kind of explained to me the data and what I'm looking at, it's really very apparent that Trump is probably on track to win big. I mean, things could change, but even if you look here on my screen, you'll see that they polled people in the New York Times, especially in a college poll in May, and it was a Trump plus 7 sample. They asked them, who'd you vote for in 2020? Shows Biden plus 3, which is around the national popular vote. That actually underestimates Biden. So the sample was actually too Republican. And when you adjust that, Trump is winning the popular vote by like 5.5. But this is a poll from May. And so that is about 2 points off from where I have the national environment. And when they did the battleground states, they asked the same questions. And Nevada and Arizona did oversample Republicans. But even when you adjust for that, they still win fairly easily in both of these elections. And in all of the states, Trump is winning by over 5 percentage points. So to say that Trump is at least not the favorite, or as at least the favorite, would be very reasonable. But I'd argue he'd actually win most of the swing states fairly easily. And I want you to go ahead and explain Virginia, because a lot of people still think Virginia is kind of leaning towards Biden, but I actually have it flipping as of right now. My forecast has the state flipping to Trump by 1.1%. So why don't you go ahead and explain to chat what's going on with that?
Yeah, so I think it might be best. I think I shared with you my Virginia modeling by demographic, um, and
Right.
you may have shown it on a previous video, but
Mm-hmm.
um, I would like to explain like how I'm actually getting those numbers because they might be different from yours and how I got them. I think
Okay.
the overall result of both of our models is generally a tilt Republican flip. I think it
Right
might
now,
be good to start
for
there.
me, it's lean actually. But let me see if I can find it here. I'm not exactly sure where it would be. I think it's gonna be in-depth breakdowns. I think it's gonna be here, and then it's
Yes, I
VA
think
big
so.
picture. Here it is. I have it here.
Yep.
So okay. So that's essentially what I have. So I have it on my screen right now. So you can go ahead and explain it to everybody.
I'm just waiting for it to load up here. I'm a few seconds behind.
No, no, yeah, you're good.
Yeah, but basically what I did, just to go over it generally, is I took the civics approval ratings, and since they do it pretty detailed, they do it, you can see on some of the other sheets there, they do it by party ID, race, gender, education, all the stuff that usually exit polls show. So it's fairly easily comparable when you do it that way. Um, so basically what I did is I tried to model pretty fair to Biden, actually. So, for example, if you take the 18 to 34 group, which in Virginia I have trending hard right, and this might even be generous to Trump, in all honesty. Winning it by 10 points is probably, you know, a bit, up in the air. That would be easily debatable, I think.
Yeah,
But
it's a little bit
it,
debatable, but it could be closer than that. But even I see here, even when 18 to 34-year-olds are tied, Biden only wins the state by about a point. And if the 65 plus vote, for whatever reason, just ends up going another point more Republican, Biden is still screwed. That's assuming that everything else holds for Biden while the 18 to 34 is tied, which is not really a guarantee. And it's also not even a guarantee he wins 50 to 64. Now, I understand the state, has a little bit of a higher income bracket compared to most Republican states. And even, on average, it's not the highest ranking state you know, in terms of class, but it definitely is up there. So that does explain the liberal trend, especially the education rank is pretty high. But even when you have that group, that would be a part of the reason why demographics are shifting so hard to the left in the state. Even when you tie them, Biden only wins by a point.
yeah, yeah.
So,
So yeah, before you go any further into like what's on the screen, I'll just show you how I got to the numbers, and those
mm,
might be on another sheet. For example, if you go to Virginia age, or sorry, this is Virginia age. If you go to like 18 to 34,
right, yes,
go to
here,
that sheet. Um, go to the bottom of that, and I
right,
think I explain it on the sheet, if I'm not mistaken,
right.
like how I'm getting these numbers. So I think the last time I updated this was a little while ago. Civics, for all your guys' information, updates every 1 to 2 days. I haven't updated it for a little while here because generally there's not a huge shift day to day, even with us, well, it goes with really any president, but um, yeah, go to the bottom of the screen there. And so what I did here is civics gives a percentage of the state that's 18 to 34, and I believe the last time I saw this was 27%.
Hmm.
Is that right?
Yes, yeah, that's what it shows there. Yes.
Yeah. And so I basically took 27% out of my projected 2024 turnout, which is 15% less than 2020. And
Right,
I tried to keep that fixed so that would be easier to model out.
right, of course,
Um,
yeah.
and so I tried to just model out like 18 to 34 turnout, and then there's 35 to 49 turnout, and so on. And so what I did then to get the modeled numbers was to take Biden's approval disapproval rating, which uh, his approval rating with the younger voters
Is really
is the
bad.
worst.
It's bad
It's the
because
worst of
you
all.
have the economy, you have immigration. Believe it or not, there's a lot of people that don't think that young people really care about immigration, but there is a lot of them that do, especially like 20 to 25-year-olds. That's a really big demographic that care about that. We also have the economy. We have Israel Hamas is a really big thing with liberal progressives, especially white progressives. Funny enough, it's actually, but Israel Hamas is affecting him more with white progressives more so than even like Arab voters per se,
Yeah,
to an extent. And that's a big reason why I could see that demographic really shifting hard to the right. That would make a lot of sense to me, to be honest.
yeah, and I could see that especially taking uh, a larger effect in a state like Minnesota. Um,
Right.
but that's kind of beside the point of this, conversation for now.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, just in terms of how I modeled out these numbers, Biden's approval last time I did this was 27. That was 27% approve. I don't
Ugh.
know what the disapproval was. It's probably somewhere in the 60s.
Wow.
Um, But what I tried to, and this is with 18 to 34, right? So
Right.
this is what you would think of as a pretty solid Democrat group. It has been for a long time. And I don't know, maybe it's turning a corner, and probably not just in Virginia, but pretty much all across the country. That's pretty evident.
Right.
Um, but I think what I did here for
Mm-hmm.
modeling it out fairly
Mm-hmm.
was to give Biden, so say 27% approve, I would
Right.
give him 37% of that total vote. So I would give Biden 10% more than his current approval.
Right.
And for Trump, I would give Biden's disapproval minus 10%.
Right.
So basically, what I'm doing here is taking Biden's current like net approval rating
Right.
and increasing that by a net 20%, which
Right.
is
Which is
it's a pretty substantial that's being pretty fair,
right, and that's
like
accounting for
especially with that group.
yeah, that's accounting for like political polarization and whatnot. Yeah, you're basically you're trying to like sample out as best as you can, but there's a big possibility that you may even be oversampling Biden's support, which is pretty nuts. But I
Yeah,
think it's pretty fair to do that because we're not in a state where Trump's not gonna get over 400 electoral votes. Even if everything goes right for him, there's no way he's gonna get over 400. I really doubt he's going to get over that. The only way he'd be able to pull that off is if he essentially won all the states he won in 2016. He'd literally have to win everything he got in 2016. And then after that, after he did that, he'd have to get Minnesota, he'd have to get Nevada, he'd have to get Virginia, he'd have to get New Mexico, he had to get Maine at large, and New Hampshire. He still has like 50 to go. He needs to get Colorado, he needs Illinois, he needs New Jersey, and he's 10 away. And so at this
then where?
point, I don't know what he would probably be able to pick up. To be honest with you, I think he'd probably pick up New York. I think that would be his most likely pickup because in my forecast, I actually have New York as like a 8 point victory for Biden. It's not that big. It's even closer than Rhode Island actually. Like Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Delaware are actually larger margins in my forecast than even the state of New York. And the reason why that's the case is because the demographic model is shifting very hard to the right, and you're seeing the state trend to the right nationwide because my new model, what I do is I get the non-partisan voting pattern of every single state. So like you tie the popular vote and you get the margin of every single state to see where it votes relative to the nation, and then you project where it's going to be in 2024. And what I do is that there's an elasticity score that I essentially predict with. So like you get the shift and you divide that by the biggest shift that was on there. So technically it would actually have to be, yeah, it's like 26. That's the biggest shift from 2012 to 2020. The biggest shift is 26.9, and it's Utah. So Utah has the biggest
Hmm.
elasticity score, and the reason why I did this is because I noticed that some states were more prone to shifting really hard than others. And I felt like it kind of made more sense to do it that way because when I did the non when you did the non partisan voting patterns for 2024, I had like Arizona voting with the nation. So that means if Biden won the popular vote by 4.5 points, he'd be winning Arizona by like 4.5. That doesn't really make sense. Like I could see it being D
Hmm.
plus one, D plus two, but not +5 for Biden. At least not right now. I can't see that happening. Could be like that in the future, but definitely not right now. For example, my Arizona model is he's projected the state of Arizona is projected to vote 2.7 points to right of the nation, which to me that makes more sense. Georgia, same thing. It's 3.2 points to right of the nation. So they still trend to the right, but it's not as much as before. Like the model had Georgia going to the like voting 2 points to the left of the nation. Like that didn't make any sense. But then Wisconsin was voting like 10 points, 11 points to the right of the nation. Like I was getting really funky numbers. So that was a big problem. Texas right now is voting 5 points to the right of the nation. So that could be a problem for Republicans in the future. Unless the demographics get way more favorable, then you have a different story. which if this result for 2024 holds up in Texas, like if he's really winning it by 17, then it'll be fine because that's 10 points to the right of the nation, essentially, which is right around it's voting 10 points to the right of the nation, which is right around where it did in 2020. So that would actually be not bad. That basically means that it would stagnate, essentially.
Yeah.
But the reason why I'm not
Yeah, I
doing
think
it, the reason why I'm not doing the projection just raw without any polling is because the polling and the demographic model does indicate certain trends and shifts that could possibly happen. And when I do my demographics, I essentially kind of go over like all the voting blocks with the 538 model. And I've been kind of putting this together for months now. I expect Trump to lose ground with plus 65 and 45 to 64 females. I expect Biden to gain with those. College and not college, Trump gains with both those groups. I expect Biden to lose a little bit with under 30K, 30 to 60K goes a little bit more Republicans. 60 to 100K gets like 2 points less Republican, and then 100K or more goes a little bit more Democrat because you have a lot of older voters that are shifting towards Biden that already have assets, and all their assets are inflating in price. So the economy is not that bad for them. And unfortunately for us, they are probably the biggest voting demographic in terms of age in the entire nation. So the only reason why Biden is not going to lose by like 400 electoral votes is literally because of boomers. That's literally the only reason why. And you could also say possibly due to the female vote as well. Like if female voters were tied in college educated voters, it would be over. Not so much like the college educated, but mostly like the female vote. That definitely is affecting. I think Trump probably gains 2 or 3 points with whites. Because I think that most of the shifts that Biden's going to make with the plus 65 group are going to be those kind of voters. But since Trump does gain with Hispanic and black voters, I still think that plus 60, that white group or at least the plus 65 group will kind of stay Republican. If it weren't for those Hispanic and black shifts, I think that group would probably be tied or at least going to the Democrat, which I think if Newsom is the nominee in 28, I think Newsom has a really good shot at actually winning plus 65. And I know some people are not going to like to hear that, but it's just the truth. And so when you model that out, and you look at everything, I have all my states here, and Virginia right now is a 1.1 percentage point victory, and your margin as of right now, if I go to big picture age,
pretty much
is
that.
1.7. So we're roughly in
Yeah.
line with each other. And obviously, before we because guys, I want to work on like an actual website forecast, kind of like how election prediction official does and stuff like that. And so before that, me, Connor, and Gold Crown Politics and a couple of other people are gonna sit down and really decide what the demographic margins should be before we like officially upload that. Just to get a little bit more of a consensus thing. Obviously, these are my own personal demographics, but me and Connor are not that far off from each other. And he's actually looking at disapproval data from civics that actually breaks it down by every single demographic. So, and my model's kind of more generalized, but he's literally looking it down from, age group, gender, which right now, if he does it based on gender, Biden wins Virginia by 3. If we look at, Virginia race picture, he wins it by a couple points. If you look at education, he wins it by around 3.5. But the age thing is really a big thing here. I also see with Arizona, you actually have Trump winning by 10 with the big age group, with the age
Yeah.
demographic, and even with gender, he's winning that by a bit. And then we look with, oh, you never ended up doing a race thing. Georgia, he's up by 6.8. I don't know, you have Arizona going more Republican than Georgia, which honestly I don't think that's gonna happen. But with the way Arizona's trending, I guess it could. I have Georgia as like 11-point victory for Trump, so that's kind of around where I have it. And Michigan, you have it at like, let me see, because you did like different
Ru-
scenarios here. Hello?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the Rust Belt, especially Michigan, Pennsylvania, I feel like my margins are pretty inflated. But those are just based on disapproval ratings, which, like I said, with young voters especially, is very high.
Right,
So I don't, I think I tried to account for 65 plus going like basically stagnating or going further to the left than expected.
right.
And that really didn't change that much. It still had Trump winning. and I think even if I tied the 18 to 34, so I
Right.
mean, something pretty drastic has to change here, it appears.
Right. And yeah, so that definitely is interesting to look at. Another thing what's quite interesting is my Senate prediction because I did construct a Senate model, which essentially what I do is I break it down by, a regular year and with the presidential results. So like right now, if we were in an off year, Kerry Lake would probably lose by 3.7. That's what I have forecasted here. And I actually have to update my 2024 margins, which I just did right now. So when we look at the results, Kerry Lake's winning by 1.2. Rick Scott only wins Florida by 5, despite the polling data. We see Montana's a 6-point victory. Ohio's a 3-point win for Moreno. Wisconsin is still a lean Democrat win. Virginia 7.4, so Hung Kao would lose by 7 points, but there's literally one poll included in the entire sample for that race. So if the polling does get, if it gets competitive, like let's say it's D plus 3, the race goes down to like plus 5 for Kane. So like there's a lot of margin, there's a lot of things that could change there. So that's definitely something to take into account as well. That's kind of what I have for the Senate. I basically have Republicans at 54 Senate seats, to Democrats 46. I don't know how you feel about that.
To be honest, I haven't really looked at the Senate much. I will say that Republicans are certainly favored. They have a pretty favorable map. Um, and Virginia might just be like the kingpin on that. Um, but yeah, I think Republicans are in pretty good shape to take it as long as we run good candidates, and I think Hung Kao will be a very strong candidate, especially for Virginia.
Right,
Obviously, he ran in 2022. He did relatively well for, I think the district he ran in was Virginia 10, and I think it was by double digits, and he lost by a couple, like 3, 4, 5 points. So
right, yeah. So
um,
he's known to be an
he's a
outperformer.
pretty good candidate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's known to be an outperformer in Virginia, but the 2021 results I don't think were really a fluke. I really don't think they were. Now, do I think if Youngkin would have ran for president, would he have won Virginia? Probably not. I think he probably would have lost it by 4 or 5. But the 2021 results did show that it's very possible for a Republican to win Virginia. It's not impossible. It's really not, especially with now voters that have never voted before are breaking towards Trump like 6-4 or like 7-3, like these crazy margins. I wouldn't be surprised if Trump actually gets Virginia on election night. I wouldn't be surprised. I really wouldn't. Now,
Yeah.
my weirdest forecast here is that Nebraska second is only like R plus one, like R plus 1.5, and the popular vote margin's like 7.5. So that's something interesting there. The polling data is really bad for Trump, though. Like there was a Republican internal that has Biden winning the district by 5. So there is a chance that that district is like seriously trending off a cliff. So that could definitely play a factor into it. Now, the district is projected to move back to the left, sort of like to the right. Like in 2020, it voted like quite a bit, or let me see, in 2020, it voted, oh no, never mind, actually. It voted 2 points to the left of the nation, but now it's projected to vote like 8.7 points to the left of the nation. So it's definitely trending left off a cliff for sure. So that's something to also take into account. And right now, essentially, with all the results that are factored into the model, pretty much when we like put all of this together, Donald Trump, I mean, he wins the electoral college very easily. It's not a really hard election. I mean, just based off of what I have here, he's gonna take a lot of states by pretty comfortable margins. New York is only like an 8-point victory. Connecticut, Delaware, Rhode Island are likely, and they're even bigger victories than New York. Illinois, around this point, is a 5.5-point victory for Biden. Colorado is actually a 3.7 percentage point victory. I wonder how you feel about that because I tried poll kind of getting aggregates with the third party candidates, but they didn't really have any. But the average actually has Biden only up by 6, and he was leading the average by like 12.5 on election day. So I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I don't think Colorado's going to be overly competitive. That's not to say it won't be within, 6 or 7 points. But it's a lot like Nebraska's second, except more on a statewide level, where it's
Hmm.
trending so far to the left, and it'll probably continue to do that even if it shifts right from
Right.
2020.
Yeah, of course.
Um, but Biden, I think, won it by like 10. It was a similar margin to Virginia,
It
actually.
was like no, it
But the
wasn't. It
state,
was like 13 and a half. But I guess if you really think about it, if the nation is shifting Biden plus 4.5 and the popular vote's like 7.5 in this, that's like a 13-point shift. So for it to be D plus 3 kind of makes sense just based off the model projection. But my personal opinion is that it's not going to be under 5. I think it's going to be like a 6 or 7 point win for Biden at best. That's what I'm thinking it's gonna be. I think maybe when I do these election prediction videos, I may start kind of referencing the model I have, but then kind of putting my own classification. I may start doing that because honestly, like, do I think Wisconsin is gonna vote for Trump by 10? Probably not. That's not what I really don't think that. I do think he wins it by 6 or 7, though. That I do think he does. I think he wins Michigan by like 5 or 6, and I think he wins Pennsylvania by 6 or 7 as well. I think Georgia, he wins it by 8 or 9. I think Arizona, he's winning that by 6 or 7, kind of similar to Michigan. I actually think Michigan's going to be a bigger victory for Trump than even Arizona. And Nevada is like a 9 or 10 point winning, and New York's like 11 or 12. That's what I kind of have there. We New Mexico, it's a weird one because you have a lot of white liberals here keeping the state really Democrat, but the Hispanic shift is so hard to the right. So I'm very conflicted on this. I'm putting it like tilt Republican. I think it's going to be a sleeper flip, but that could change. Virginia, Minnesota, these could go lean, and I think likely Maine at large. The first district is there. I think the second congressional district is lean Republican, but not +1. I think it's probably like +3. And New Jersey, I think, is under 5 because the only pollster with third party candidates included that we have has him only winning it by 5. And he's been underestimated here twice. So and my forecast has him winning it by, if we see here, he's winning it by 3.3. So I wouldn't necessarily be that surprised if that was the case. And New Hampshire, I think Trump does pick it off very narrowly right now, but it's going to be competitive. Like Biden could definitely win New Hampshire for sure, and may not large. I think Trump does actually get it by 2 points, just because of the fact that right now, Donald Trump in the state of Maine at large, he's polling very well there. And I think that's mainly because of like third party candidates taking a lot of votes from Biden. So, like, what do you think about this projection?
yeah, so definitely Maine at large is a pretty like just generally it's pretty hard to poll. And, like just look at the Susan Collins races when people thought she was going to lose by 5 and she ended up winning by
Like
a
10.
lot.
She won by like
Yeah,
10. Yeah. If we go back here, let me see if I'm right. She won by 8.6%. She won
yeah.
very easily. But
Still,
that was mostly from what I understand, what's quite funny is that Biden won the state by 9.1. So there was a group of voters that basically went out there and were like, okay, we're gonna vote for Biden, but we gotta put a check on him in the Senate, so we're gonna keep our senator. And she was already pretty popular. But I've heard that's a pretty big thing up there. Like there's a large population up there that like votes intentionally like that, which is kind of cool. if
hmm,
if they were to, and the reason why I know that is because my I had a professor this year that she's from Maine, and a lot of the times that she says that they people, from what she's done, there's a lot of people that meet up at restaurants like before elections and they like talk about who they're going to vote for and stuff like that. Like apparently that's a really big thing up there.
hmm.
So that I thought that was pretty interesting, and I'm not surprised that Maine is that way because I feel like Maine is very deliberate and like how they kind of vote. Like Clinton barely won it; she only won it by like 3, and then in 2012, Obama won it very decisively, and so did he in 2000. George Bush didn't really get close to winning it either time. And then it voted for Reagan both times. I mean, he won it very narrowly in 80, but in an 84, he won it very easily. And then Bush kind of won it comfortably to a certain extent. So um they're very deliberate in how they vote. But we have seen that second district in Maine has been kind of trending away from Democrats. And right now, my forecast has it as a very large win. He's actually winning it by, if I pull it up here, he's winning the district by 23 points. I don't think he's going to win it by 23. He probably wins it by, I'd say 16, 17 points maybe. And Maine's first is probably like 12 or 13 for Biden, something like that. But that's kind of where I see that right now. Um, do you have anything else to comment on this so far, or not really?
Uh, yeah, not really. I mean, I was gonna say I agree with New Mexico being a pretty large sleeper flip, and honestly, New Hampshire as well. Although New Mexico and New Hampshire, I wouldn't be surprised if those are voting to the left of even a state like Virginia. Um,
Yeah,
Maybe New Mexico, that'd be a bit more debatable with the Hispanic vote and how much that, affects the state versus the white suburbanite vote in Albuquerque.
right,
Then New Hampshire too, there's a large old population up there, and you
right,
know, New Mexico, New Hampshire doesn't tend to like incumbents, but Biden
right.
might be doing better with 65 plus,
Right,
so
so that's the
that might be
thing.
up in the air
Right.
too.
Right, that's the thing. And like with this, I'm gonna just model this out really quick just so people could see this. I think DeSantis versus Newsom would be an interesting matchup. I have a few hot takes for this one. I have a couple hot takes. A lot of people are gonna not agree with me. Everyone's gonna be like, "What are you talking about?" So I think that Newsom wins Colorado by like over 15 points. I think he wins it by over 15 against Newsom or against DeSantis. Um, I think that more than likely DC, Maryland, Massachusetts, all these states would go to the left. I think Delaware is closer. I only think the only reason why it's kind of voting more liberal is because Biden's on the ballot. I think after Biden is gone, I think that state's going to start trending to the right quite a bit. Uh, I think South Carolina would be safer. I think that's going to be safer because DeSantis wouldn't do as well with African Americans as Trump would, but I think he would actually retain most of the base just because I think that there are going to be long term shifts with the GOP. But I think Newsom is going to do decent with independents and he's going to do very well with 65 plus and with white voters. I think he would actually make pretty decent gains with white voters. So you're going to start seeing the coalitions kind of change. And like Alaska, I think DeSantis would only win it by like 7 or 8 against Newsom. I don't know how you feel about that.
Hmm. Potentially. This is
Hawaii,
obviously pretty hypothetical, but
right,
Alaska is like obviously like one of those weird states too, but they tend
right,
to have more the conservative or not conservative, the moderate Republican
right.
sort of type. So maybe that would be, an issue for DeSantis, with great, base fracture if he was a nominee. There'd obviously be a huge problem with, base fracture, and who knows if he runs again in 2028 and if this is a matchup then, but
That's what I was
that
saying.
might
This
still
would
be a
be a
problem even
this
then.
is this would be a 2028 matchup, and I think it would definitely be a problem for him then, especially since you don't have the incumbent president running. That'd be a really big problem, for the Republicans that year. My hot take is that Utah would be under 15. That's my hot take, because Trump. Hello.
Yep.
Because Trump, with third party candidates on the ballot in Utah, already suffers. And if this is the matchup, I don't think third party turnout would be as high as it is going to be this year, but I think it would still be high enough to take some votes from DeSantis. So I think that the state would be like a 12 or 13 point win for DeSantis. That's my guess as of right now. That's what I'm thinking, but I'm not sure. That's kind of where I'm at with that. Kansas, I think DeSantis would only win it by like 10. I think he'd only win it by 10. Now, Hawaii, I think Newsom wins it by 12 or 13, though, because I think it's going to trend to the right. I think it is going to be under 15 points. I think that Ohio, see, this is a hard one because I think it would probably be likely, but it would be like borderline likely. I think DeSantis wins that by like 12 and Iowa's like 16, 17. Because I think both these states are going to trend to the right, but I think Iowa is going to trend further to the right than say Ohio, for example. Florida, I think, would be likely Republican. I think it would be like a 10 or 11 point win for DeSantis. I think Texas is interesting because I actually think it'd only be a 7 point win, 6 point win for him. I think DeSantis only wins it by 6 or 7. Like you're going to see Florida vote significantly to the right of Texas. Now,
Hmm.
with New York and Illinois, I think Illinois and New York are closer. I think these would be closer states. I think Illinois is like a 12 point win for Newsom. And I think DeSantis would actually lose it by the same amount that Trump does now. I think he'd lose it by 8 or 9, which would indicate a Republican shift in the state. So if a Republican in 2032 were to win the popular vote, the state would be under 5, essentially. That's what I'm kind of projecting. But you would see similar margins there. In New Jersey, I actually think the state would be under 5. I think the state would be under 5. I think a lot of the racial demographics, there's a lot of Hispanics and African Americans here, and you have a decent white population here, but I think that New Jersey is going to take a little bit of a turn to the right, especially after Trump is gone, and I think it is going to be under 5. Like, it's definitely going to be a part of the, oh, okay, like the Rust Belt states now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, to a degree.
Right,
Like obviously the New York City suburbs and New Jersey is generally a wealthier state.
right,
But yeah, I could see it going to the right. You know, even this year, I don't know how close it's going to be this
right.
year. I think I didn't share this with you, but I did some of the non-battlegrounds, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in New Jersey also showed up as uh upper lean margin, like between 3 and 4%.
Oh wow. Which
So
is
I
right where I
I
have
think
it.
it
I have it right now. I have it at -3.
yeah. Yeah, but I think it definitely does take a shift to the right. It probably even trends right as well.
No, yeah.
Um, but I think the future of that state's actually going to be pretty interesting to watch along with Delaware.
Right, yeah, me too. I think those are going to be interesting to look at. Virginia, but I think Newsom wins it by like 6 or 7 again. This is assuming the popular vote's like D+3, D+2. That's like what I'm thinking. I think he wins it by 6 or 7. I think Illinois and New York are going to trend to the right, while Virginia still kind of trends to the left. But I think the trend will stagnate eventually. I think by the 2030s, I think Democrats are going to max out with their trends in Virginia. That's my opinion. I think they're going to
Yeah.
max out with their trends in Virginia. Now, New Hampshire, I think goes to Newsom by probably 3 or 4. DeSantis would do okay here, but I think that, with Trump being the incumbent, it's an anti incumbent state. But since Trump would have probably picked it off, you would probably have some trends there that's favorable, but it's also DeSantis versus Newsom, and Newsom wins the popular vote. So you would probably see it be lean Democrat. Nebraska second, I think would be very close. I think DeSantis would actually not do bad here. I think he would pick it off. So you would see that go. Meanwhile, a state like New Mexico, I actually think would be lean. I think it'd actually be lean Democrat. And you see Colorado, New Mexico would be like completely opposite from each other at that point. Colorado would be like a 16, 17 point win here, while New Mexico is like a literally 2, 3 point win for Newsom. I think at this point, I think it's just Newsom's winning the popular vote by too much to really lose it, but I think it's definitely going to be trending really hard to the right, especially after 2028, because you're going to have a lot of liberals that would not vote for Trump even now, that I think would probably kind of either sit at home because they're not enthused to turn out against the Republican, or you would have something where DeSantis actually does not bad with them. Because I think DeSantis would actually improve with Hispanic voters from 2020, or from at least from 2024 with Trump, but I think with African Americans and white voters, I think he regresses a decent amount, especially with white voters. And North Carolina, I think he wins it by 2.5, 3. That state's kind of trending to the right as well, so I wouldn't be surprised by that. Minnesota, on the other hand, I think it's lean. I think Newsom probably picks it off by like 3 or 4. So it actually votes to the left of New Mexico in this scenario. I think he does win it by a lean margin, but I do think that Republicans long term would do better in the actual city area, and I think they would be doing better in the southern part of the rural areas in the state. So that's why you do see it vote under 5 points. Now, unfortunately for Arizona, I think DeSantis is probably cooked in Arizona. It's close. I think it'll be a close race, but that. I really doubt that's going to be the case. I think that
Yeah.
Newsom probably takes it by zero point 0.8, more than likely. Now, Nevada, I think DeSantis takes that by like 2 or 3. I think that, yes, I think he takes that by 2 or 3. That's kind of roughly what I'm looking at there right now, because Trump would have made long-term gains with Republicans there, and I think that would be a pretty fair assessment. Even in a state like Georgia, this one's hard to tell, but I guess since DeSantis is not improving with African Americans, he lost some ground with them and white voters, especially since this is a large non-college area and Atlanta does have a lot of black population. I'd probably put Georgia tilt Republican. It'd be close. I think that Newsom wouldn't be popular enough to flip it, but I think DeSantis would hold on to it. And now DeSantis literally just needs Michigan or Pennsylvania to win. Now, with the Rust Belt, you're going to see something interesting because there are some really weird voting patterns that I think are going to start happening. I think that right now, if I had to basically guess who would win these states, it's very hard because this election would really be decided here. And Newsom needs two of them to win. And actually, he actually really needs Michigan and Pennsylvania, essentially. That's what he would need to win. Now, I want to hear your thoughts of where these would go first, and then I'll give my takes on these.
Yeah, so this is obviously highly dependent on 2024 results.
Right.
But let's say, just for the sake of the argument, that Trump's winning Pennsylvania by 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it would obviously take a lot of, I guess, drop off with the enthusiasm, especially in the rural areas. Like, just think back to Dr. Oz in 2022. Like, it would
Mm-hmm.
probably have to take something like that
Right,
for
yeah.
DeSantis to lose the state from what would be a hypothetical 3 to 4 point win. Um,
Right.
but also, I guess that could also depend on, what Trump does in that campaign. That's down the road some ways.
Right.
Um, but I think Pennsylvania would probably be like a 2016 margin, and that could go either way.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be like one, point and a half either way. That
Right.
really just depends on how viable DeSantis would be viewed as a candidate.
Right.
Um, and that goes the same for Wisconsin and Michigan too.
Right.
Um, I I don't know if DeSantis would do as well in Wisconsin, to be honest with you.
No, and I don't think so
Um,
either.
I
I don't think so.
I
And
don't think he would do.
I was actually going to
Yeah,
mention
go ahead.
something fairly interesting. Wisconsin is also the most white Rust Belt state out of all of these. And so I think Newsom would win Wisconsin. I think he gets that one. But the problem is, I really don't know if he'd get Michigan or Pennsylvania. That's the weird part that I was telling you about. Wisconsin, I think Newsom would actually do better there than Michigan and Pennsylvania because since DeSantis would hemorrhage a lot with white voters and essentially with older voters, you could see Wisconsin vote left. Now, do I think that both of these would go Republican? Probably not, but I could see one of them going. If I had to say, Michigan probably stays Democrat because you do have the Detroit area, and you do have that Detroit area which has a lot of African Americans. But I think DeSantis would win Pennsylvania. I think he gets it because voter registration in Pennsylvania out of these three states has actually been the state that has the most new registered Republicans. Like the Republican enthusiasm in Pennsylvania, regardless of candidate, has been the highest in that state alone.
Yeah.
And
It's
so I
also hard to compare that too, just because Wisconsin, I know doesn't do registrations by party ID.
No, they don't.
Uh, I I'm does Michigan do it? They might not do it either. They might just
Right.
do total registrations, and they do
Right.
that every 3 months. They update it.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to compare that. You'd have to model that out. But yeah, I totally agree. Pennsylvania is really looking quite favorable uh, for Republicans in terms of registrations. We just got
Right.
to get them out.
Right. And if this were to happen, this would be a weird map. This would be a very strange map for a matchup like this, because DeSantis would it would be a weird election night because everybody would be going into it like, okay, Newsom's gonna probably win, and then you would have the state calls like essentially. By the time we get to a certain point, this is kind of the results that are left. So it looks a lot like 2020 election night, but more than likely, since Pennsylvania would be projected the winner in Pennsylvania, and that state starts counting votes first, more than likely you would see Pennsylvania already projected for him, like in the probably like at 10 p.m. or something like that, 11, or maybe a little bit after, because Trump didn't really get called here until after that, maybe like 1 or 2 a.m. But it would essentially be done the night of. And a lot of people would kind of be like, well, is he going to win these two? Like, everyone would be like, oh, is he going to win the rest of the states? But then it really turns out that it would be pretty apparent that, yeah, he gets Nevada and he gets the second congressional district. But then people would see Arizona and be like, wait. And then everyone's going to see Michigan and be like, hold on. And then Wisconsin's going to go blue and everyone's going to be like, I would generally think in this scenario, if this were to happen, I'm pretty sure the Newsom campaign would declare voter fraud 100%, because they would be like, how's Pennsylvania going to go red, but not Wisconsin and Michigan?
Well, honestly, that's a question I would be asking too, because that's a weird map.
Yeah,
I mean,
it would be
it,
strange, but I think based on DeSantis being a more like, it's not establishment, well, I mean, kind of, but if you look at the results here in like 2012, Pennsylvania was the more Republican Rust Belt state out of Wisconsin and Michigan. And same thing in like 2008, even. And actually, Minnesota was the closer one, believe it or not, which is really interesting. But Pennsylvania was essentially right there with Minnesota. And so I think DeSantis would do a little bit better with some of those demographics that made that state the most Republican Rust Belt state at the time. But he would kind of hold the rules. And I don't really think that that Newsom would do that well with the suburban voters here. Now, with Wisconsin, I think he does well because he probably gains a lot with white voters and older voters. And I think he actually wins Wisconsin by like zero point 0.8. Michigan, I think, is like 0.3. And I think Pennsylvania would essentially be like a zero point 0.4 victory for DeSantis. Like, it'd be close. But the Rust Belt, people would be shocked by it. People would definitely think it's weird. People would definitely, if that were to happen, everyone would be like, whoa, like, that was not supposed to happen. But it would have happened. So,
yeah. Just a quick note. I'm probably gonna hop off in a few here, but
okay.
just a quick note on Wisconsin. Uh, I think Newsom would also do better with young voters, especially
Yeah. Yeah, I think
in
so too.
Dane County, Milwaukee, like those big areas that give Democrats their margin of victories all the time. I think he would do good enough with those voters, probably not as well as Democrats of the past, like Obama and Biden in 2020.
Right. No.
But I think he would do well enough, especially pairing that with Santa's kind of struggling with the white voters a little bit more.
Right.
Uh, and I think that's probably the reason why Wisconsin would go, you know, slightly to Newsom, albeit, but
Right.
still probably go to him in the end.
Now, if it's Vivek, which honestly, because the whole scenario with that is with Vivek, it's interesting because he basically said, well, if the country's in good shape, I'm not going to run. So that essentially means like if Biden gets reelected, uh, so like essentially, let's say
You can't
Biden
run.
wins, but let's say Biden wins 270. Like he gets the Rust Belt, he loses Sun Belt, and that's it. Honestly, if Ramaswamy is the nominee against Newsom and Biden just won re-election, it's not going to even be close. The conversation is completely different. Ramaswamy would basically win, probably, maybe not New Mexico or Virginia, but definitely it would be a lopsided victory. Like, I think Ramaswamy would probably be able to win in a pretty big fashion in 28 if Biden gets reelected.
Yeah.
The conversation is completely different. And what you'll notice is I think that here, I think Colorado, New Mexico actually go likely Democrat. I think Virginia would be likely. Here, I think New York and Illinois would be like would probably be. I think New York would actually be under 5 here, and I think the Rust Belt, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania would be likely, but not Michigan. Minnesota would probably be tilt Republican. Arizona would be lean. Nevada would be likely. Georgia likely. North Carolina likely. Texas and Florida likely. And then Newsom probably does okay in the West Coast there. Alaska would be under 15, and you'd probably see some of these states trend. New Jersey and Delaware, I think, would get under 5, and New Hampshire, I think, would actually go lean alongside Maine, and Nebraska second would go lean Republican. So this is kind of like a hypothetical 28 map. If that was the matchup, this is kind of what I see happening. Maybe New Mexico is under 5, but it would probably still be like a 4-point win for Newsom at that point.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm
Yeah.
probably going to hop off here. Um,
All right.
it was a good discussing
All right.
politics with you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Well, I'm gonna end up probably ending the
Yep.
stream. I'm gonna check the results now for the primaries, but we're essentially probably gonna end this off now. So Hung Cao's already projected the winner. Damn, he's about to pass 100,000 votes, and Republicans total for 127,000 votes. That's not bad, and they're doing pretty well. And he's literally winning every single county. Oklahoma, some of the House races have essentially come in here, all the uncontested ones at least. And if you go to Georgia, a lot of these probably gotten called. Lane Johnson won, Brian Jack won, and Sean Harris won as well. And then we have a lot of the state legislature and state house results still coming in. Those are taking quite a bit to come in. But guys, that is pretty much it for this live stream. As of right now, we did go for a little while. As of right now, I was just kind of discussing certain results and hypothetical scenarios with you guys. But if you guys did enjoy the stream, please hit the like button before you go. Make sure to go ahead and follow the Twitter and join the Discord server in the description down below. And I will see you guys very soon. I am doing a live stream for the debate, by the way. Nicholas Homasan, a Humus Mans for 199. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And guys, that is essentially it for the stream. Make sure to go ahead and like it. Make sure to go ahead and subscribe. Make sure to go ahead and follow Twitter and join the Discord server in the description down below. And I will see you guys